Lena had been working at the small cafe for as long as she could remember. It was a quiet place, tucked on the corner of a narrow street, where the sun filtered gently through the windows in the morning, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with baked bread filled the air. Every day she put on her apron and moved behind the counter, wiping tables, pouring drinks, and greeting customers with a warm smile. Life was not easy, but she found comfort in the simple routine of the cafe. Outside, a boy had begun appearing every day around the same time in the morning. He never came inside. He just sat quietly on the steps watching the people go in and out. He was small for his age, with clothes that looked too big and torn in several places. His hair was unkempt, and there was a thinness to him that made Lena's chest tighten whenever she saw him. The first time she noticed him, she thought he might be lost or alone. The way he sat so still and careful seemed to say that he had been outside too long, that he had learned to watch quietly and not ask for anything. Lena didn't know why, but she felt a pull toward him. Something about the boy made her want to help, even though she barely had enough for herself. On her first impulse, she made him a small plate of bread and a piece of fruit. She left it on the corner of the counter where he could see it from outside and stepped back. The boy looked up at her, eyes wide and dark, unsure. Then slowly, he took a small step forward, picked up the plate and carried it to the corner where he could sit safely. He didn't say anything, not a word, not even a sound. He just ate quietly, as if he had been waiting for someone to care enough to bring food. After that day, Lena began leaving small portions of food for him every morning. She would make sure the bread was fresh, cut fruit neatly, and sometimes even add a small pastry if she had the extra. She never tried to speak to him directly, knowing he didn't respond to words. It became a secret ritual between them. Each morning, Lena would watch from behind the counter and the boy would appear, always cautious, always silent. There was an understanding between them, unspoken but powerful. It wasn't just about the food. Over time, Lena began noticing small details about him. How he flinched when people walked too close, how he avoided puddles in the street, as if he had learned to navigate a world that didn't notice him. How his eyes would linger on the warmth of the cafe lights as if he wanted to be inside but didn't think he belonged. She started leaving small notes sometimes, simple drawings of a sun or a flower, letting him know that someone was thinking about him. He would pick them up and study them quietly, then tuck them into his pocket or backpack. Lena's days became intertwined with the boy's presence. She found herself planning her mornings around him, making sure she could prepare something fresh even if it meant skipping breakfast herself. She never mentioned him to her coworkers, fearing they might scold her or tell her she couldn't afford to waste food. It didn't feel like a waste to her. To Lena, it felt like the only thing that made sense in a world where so many passed by without noticing. The boy was careful, cautious, but over time, she could see small changes. He began sitting closer to the cafe, his posture less tense. Sometimes he would look at her with what seemed like gratitude, a tiny sparkle in his eyes. Lena wanted to speak to him, to know his story, but she understood that he communicated in his own way. Words weren't necessary when understanding existed in shared glances and gentle gestures. One rainy morning, Lena noticed the boy shivering in the drizzle. His coat was thin and wet, and he hugged himself to try to keep warm. Her heart clenched. Without thinking, she grabbed a towel and a plate of hot food and ran outside. She knelt beside him and handed him the towel, wrapping it around his shoulders. The boy looked at her, eyes wide, a mixture of fear and curiosity. He didn't speak, but he didn't pull away. She handed him the hot food, and he ate quietly, hungrily, as if he hadn't eaten in days. She sat nearby, watching over him, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. From that day, the ritual changed slightly. She would sometimes let him come inside the cafe, sit at a corner table, and eat while she moved behind the counter. She never forced him to speak, never asked him questions. She only offered warmth and food, the small comforts she could provide. Each day she noticed the boy looking a little healthier, a little more comfortable, and it filled her with a quiet sense of accomplishment. It wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about the bond forming between them, silent but unbreakable. The townspeople rarely noticed the boy. Some assumed he was a vagrant, others ignored him completely. But Lena saw him, and that was enough. She began keeping track of his habits, learning when he arrived, how long he stayed, and what he liked to eat. She would sometimes leave extra fruit, bread, or even a warm drink, just knowing he would appreciate it even if he couldn't say it. Each day she found small joys in seeing him pick up the food she left, and each day the connection between them grew stronger. She didn't know much about his past or why he didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Lena's small acts of care were enough to provide him safety, warmth, and comfort. In return, the boy's quiet presence gave her mornings meaning. She found herself smiling more, feeling lighter in a way she hadn't in years. The cafe wasn't just a place of work anymore. It had become a space of quiet compassion, a place where two lonely souls could exist together without words, without judgment, only understanding. Lena never asked for anything in return. She didn't expect the boy to ever speak or to acknowledge her publicly. The moments they shared, simple and quiet, were enough. She started noticing that her customers also began appreciating the warmth of the cafe more, commenting on how welcoming it felt, how kind the staff seemed. Lena knew it was not just the coffee or the food that made the difference. It was the small, invisible acts of care that created a gentle atmosphere everyone could feel. Evenings were different. After the cafe closed and the streetlights came on, the boy would leave quietly, disappearing into the shadows, always returning the next morning. Lena would wash dishes, clean tables, and think about him, wondering if he was safe, if he had enough to eat through the night, if he was warm. The thought of him alone sometimes made her heart ache, but she knew that her small gestures made a difference, however small it might seem. The routine continued, day after day, until Lena realized that her life had shifted subtly, imperceptibly, around the presence of this quiet boy. She had found a purpose beyond the work, beyond the cafe, beyond the small concerns of daily life. Each plate she prepared for him, each towel she wrapped around his shoulders, was a statement of care and humanity in a world that often ignored those who needed it most. One morning, as Lena was arranging the food for the boy, she noticed him standing a little taller, looking at her with a calmness that had not been there before. There was trust in his gaze now, trust built through countless mornings of silent companionship. She realized then that her small acts of kindness were no longer just about feeding him. They were about giving him a sense of belonging, of safety, of dignity. The world outside the cafe remained busy and indifferent, but within those walls and on those steps, a quiet miracle was unfolding. Lena had become a lifeline, a beacon of hope for a boy who had learned that words were not necessary for connection. In the quiet mornings, in the soft light filtering through the cafe windows, a bond was forming that neither of them had expected, a bond that would withstand whatever challenges lay ahead. Over the following weeks, Lena noticed subtle changes in the boy. Though he never spoke, there was a shift in the way he approached the cafe. He seemed less hesitant, more comfortable sitting on the steps, and sometimes he would glance at her with what seemed like recognition. Lena found herself anticipating his arrival, planning her mornings around the time he would appear. Each day she prepared food with care, adding little touches like a slice of fruit or a small pastry, things she knew would bring him a little joy. One morning, the boy arrived earlier than usual. The sky was pale with dawn and the street was quiet, only the soft sound of birds in the distance. He was shivering, his thin coat doing little to protect him from the morning chill. Lena quickly prepared a plate of warm bread and fruit and poured a small cup of cocoa. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if he would accept her help today. But as she stepped outside and extended the food toward him, his eyes lit up and he took it carefully, almost reverently, before retreating to his usual corner. She stayed nearby, quietly observing him eat, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. As the days passed, Lena began to leave small drawings alongside the food. Simple sketches of flowers, the sun, and little animals, things that might make him smile. At first, he would only glance at them before tucking them away, but gradually he started to interact with them. One morning, she found a tiny drawing left on her counter, a crude sketch of her with a smiling face. Her heart leapt. She realized he had noticed her gestures and wanted to respond in his own way. Though he couldn't speak, their communication was deepening, evolving in quiet, meaningful ways. One particularly rainy afternoon, the boy arrived looking even thinner than usual, his hair plastered to his forehead. He hugged himself tightly to keep warm. Lena couldn't stand it. She grabbed a large towel and some hot food, ran outside and wrapped it around him. The boy looked at her, hesitant at first but did not pull away. She offered the food and he ate quickly, ravenously, as if he had been surviving on almost nothing. Lena sat nearby, watching him, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. She understood that this moment was more than just feeding him. It was providing safety, warmth, and care, things he had been missing for far too long. After that day, Lena made a quiet decision. On particularly cold or rainy mornings, she would let the boy sit inside the cafe, at a small corner table, where he could eat in relative comfort. She didn't force him to interact with anyone or speak. She simply provided a space where he could exist without fear or judgment. The boy began to stay a little longer, sometimes watching her work, sometimes looking at the other customers with cautious curiosity. Lena noticed that he had an eye for detail, observing things others might overlook. He would watch the way she poured the coffee, how she arranged pastries, and even the little way she wiped the tables. There was an intelligence in his gaze, quiet but piercing, and Lena began to appreciate it more each day. Lena's co-workers noticed changes in her demeanor too. She smiled more, laughed quietly at small things, and seemed lighter, despite the long hours and hard work. She didn't tell anyone about the boy, fearing that people might misunderstand her actions or even disapprove. This was her secret, her quiet act of kindness that made her mornings feel meaningful. It became more than a routine. It was a bond, fragile yet strong, built on trust and unspoken understanding. Sometimes Lena would notice him leaving small things behind. A shiny pebble, a scrap of paper with a sketch, even a leaf carefully placed on the table. It was as if he wanted to communicate, to show appreciation, but didn't know how to do it in words. Each time she found these small offerings, her heart swelled. She realized that their connection wasn't just about feeding him. It was about acknowledging his presence, validating his existence in a world that often ignored people like him. There were moments when Lena worried about him. She didn't know his story, didn't know where he slept at night or if he had anyone looking out for him. She imagined the dangers he might face on the streets, and it scared her. But she also knew that her small gestures could make a difference, even if it was just for a few hours each day. The boy had come to rely on her and she on him. The cafe had become a quiet haven, a place where two lonely souls could find comfort in each other's presence. One day, as Lena prepared a plate of food, she noticed the boy lingering near the door, watching her. There was a hesitation in his movements, a kind of tentative curiosity. She smiled and gestured toward the plate, and he slowly approached, taking it with care. As he ate, he looked around the cafe, eyes wide with wonder, taking in the warmth, the light, and the small comforts that Lena had created. She realized that for him, this small space was a world of safety, a contrast to the harshness he faced outside. Lena began thinking creatively about how to make his visits more comfortable. She would occasionally leave a small blanket, a warm drink, or an extra pastry. She even started leaving a notebook with pencils on a quiet table, curious if he might want to draw. At first he hesitated, but over time he began to leave sketches behind, simple images of flowers, birds, and sometimes abstract shapes. Lena treasured these drawings, seeing them as his way of communicating, of sharing a piece of himself in a world that often didn't notice him. The boy's presence also began to affect the atmosphere in the cafe. Regular customers sensed a subtle warmth, an unspoken kindness that seemed to radiate from the staff. People commented on the welcoming feeling of the place, not knowing the quiet story unfolding at the corner table each morning. Lena realized that her small act of caring had ripple effects, creating a gentle energy that touched everyone, even if they didn't know why. There were challenges, of course. Some days the boy didn't appear at all. Lena worried, wondering if something had happened, if he had gone hungry or was in trouble. Other days, he would come later than usual, moving cautiously, as if testing the boundaries of trust. Lena remained patient, never forcing interaction, never showing frustration. She knew that trust, once broken, could be hard to rebuild, and she valued the fragile bond they shared. As weeks turned into months, Lena noticed a remarkable change in the boy. He seemed healthier, stronger, and more confident. His movements were less hesitant, his gaze less fearful. Though he never spoke, Lena sensed that he had grown to trust her deeply, and that their connection was more than just about food. It was about safety, care, and companionship. They had created a quiet world for themselves, a space where the boy could exist without fear, and Lena could express her empathy in tangible ways. There were moments of pure joy, too. One morning, the boy arrived with a small drawing in his hand. It was a sketch of Lena smiling, with a heart drawn beside her. She felt a rush of emotion, tears threatening to fall. Though he couldn't speak, this simple gesture conveyed more than words ever could. He had chosen to communicate his gratitude and trust through art, and Lena understood it perfectly. She carefully placed the drawing on the counter, smiling warmly at him, feeling an unspoken bond strengthen even further. The bond between them became a quiet rhythm of life. Lena's mornings were now defined not just by the tasks of the cafe, but by the anticipation of seeing him, of sharing these silent moments together. She had discovered that acts of kindness didn't always require acknowledgement, that the value lay in giving without expectation. And the boy, in turn, had learned that the world could hold moments of safety, warmth, and care, even if it often felt harsh and unkind. Even as the world outside continued its rush, Lena and the boy found a stillness in their mornings. The cafe became a small sanctuary, a place where two lonely hearts could connect without words. Each plate of food, each drawing, each gentle glance was a thread weaving their lives together. And though neither spoke aloud, they communicated through actions, gestures, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the most powerful connections are the ones that need no words. Weeks passed, and Lena's quiet routine with the boy continued, growing more intimate and profound with each passing day. Yet a subtle unease began to creep in. The boy was never alone on the streets, even if no one else seemed to notice. Occasionally, Lena caught glimpses of shadowy figures observing him from a distance, or people whispering when he walked by. She tried to dismiss her worry, telling herself it was just her imagination, but her instincts told her that someone was watching, and she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble might be on the horizon. One afternoon, as Lena prepared a plate of food for the boy, a man lingered nearby, pretending to read a newspaper but glancing repeatedly toward the steps where the boy usually sat. Lena felt a cold wave of fear. She quickly adjusted her apron and went outside, trying to act casual. The boy arrived just as usual, but he stiffened when he noticed the man. Lena noticed the tension in his posture, and her heart ached. She gestured him toward the food, and he hesitated, glancing at her for reassurance. She nodded subtly, letting him know it was safe. Slowly he approached, picking up the plate as though it were a shield between him and the world. After that day, Lena became hyper-aware of her surroundings. She began staying after closing to make sure the boy wasn't followed or harmed. Some days she even walked him a short distance, maintaining a careful distance herself to ensure he reached a safer area before returning home, wherever that was. She knew she couldn't force him to tell her anything, couldn't ask questions about his life or his fears. The boy's silence was a language in itself, and she had learned to read it with care and patience. Despite the fear and tension, their bond continued to deepen. Lena discovered small things about him that made her smile, subtle habits and gestures that revealed his personality. He loved patterns, watching the way raindrops ran down the cafe window, arranging crumbs in neat lines before eating, or carefully stacking napkins. She began leaving small items for him to play with, a piece of chalk, a small toy, or even a simple puzzle. At first he didn't touch them, but gradually he began to engage, solving puzzles silently or drawing patterns on scraps of paper. These moments of connection were small victories, signs that trust was growing stronger. One day, a woman passed by the cafe, stopping abruptly when she saw the boy. She whispered to a companion, pointing at him and speaking with urgency. Lena noticed immediately. Her pulse quickened. Who were these people? Were they concerned for him, or were they the reason he had been alone all this time? She kept her distance but remained watchful, ready to intervene if necessary. The boy, as always, approached the food cautiously, keeping his eyes low and hands close to his body. Lena felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders like never before. The days became a delicate dance of trust, observation, and protection. Lena could not let anyone take him from the safety she had built. Yet she also knew she could not keep him hidden forever. The world had begun to notice, and she feared the consequences. Her mind spun with possibilities, each one more frightening than the last, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Her priority was the boy's safety and well-being, no matter what might come. The boy, in his own silent way, seemed to sense the growing tension. He arrived each morning more alert, sometimes hiding behind corners or keeping a cautious eye on passers-by. Lena responded with quiet gestures of reassurance, placing a hand lightly on the table, offering a warm smile, leaving extra food and small comforts to show that she would always be there. It was a language without words, one that required patience, observation, and an open heart. One evening, as Lena was closing the cafe, she noticed the boy standing at the edge of the street, looking uncertain. She approached carefully and gestured for him to follow. He hesitated, then slowly walked with her a short distance, stopping only when she indicated it was safe. This small act, a few minutes of guidance, felt monumental. It reinforced their bond and reminded Lena why she continued her quiet mission of care, despite the growing anxiety and danger. Over time, Lena started keeping a small journal, documenting the boy's habits, the items he liked, and the ways he interacted with the world. She didn't write to expose him, but to understand him better, to anticipate his needs, and to ensure his safety. The journal became a secret map of trust, detailing moments of connection, small victories, and subtle threats. She began noticing patterns in his movements and routines, allowing her to plan her mornings more effectively. Each entry was a testament to her devotion and a reminder that even the smallest actions could have profound effects. The tension in the streets did not subside. People continued to whisper, strangers lingered, and Lena's vigilance never waned. Yet amidst the fear, moments of beauty and joy persisted. The boy would occasionally leave tiny drawings, simple sketches of the cafe or abstract shapes on napkins or scraps of paper. Lena would treasure each one, seeing in them his attempts to communicate, to connect, and to acknowledge her care. They had developed a unique dialogue, one that did not rely on words but spoke volumes about trust, kindness, and human connection. One rainy afternoon, the boy arrived with a small piece of folded paper in his hand. Lena's heart raced. Carefully, she unfolded it to reveal a drawing, a depiction of her behind the counter, smiling and surrounded by plates of food. Beside her, a heart was drawn, simple but unmistakable. She felt a rush of emotion, tears threatening to fall. Though he could not speak, this simple gesture conveyed his gratitude, trust, and recognition. It was a turning point, a quiet declaration that their bond had become unshakable, despite the dangers around them. Lena's days were now a blend of routine, observation, and careful protection. She continued to prepare food, leave drawings, and ensure the boy's safety, but her vigilance had reached a new level. Every passerby, every stranger, every whisper of movement in the street made her alert. She knew the world was not always kind, and that someone might try to interfere with the small sanctuary they had created. But she also knew that their connection was stronger than fear, stronger than uncertainty. As the weeks continued, Lena observed subtle shifts in the boy's confidence. He began sitting a little closer to the cafe, looking around with a hint of curiosity rather than fear. He interacted with the items she left for him, solving puzzles, arranging objects, and leaving small gifts in return. It was as if he were slowly opening up to the world, learning that trust could exist, that kindness was real, and that he did not have to face life alone. Lena's heart swelled with pride and relief, yet the sense of looming danger persisted. The boy's past remained a mystery, a puzzle Lena could not solve. The whispers, the strangers, and the occasional shadowy figure reminded her that their small world of safety was fragile. She redoubled her efforts, ensuring that the cafe remained a haven, that her gestures of care were consistent, and that the boy always had a place to turn when the world outside felt harsh and unkind. In the evenings, after the cafe was quiet and the streetlights flickered on, Lena reflected on the weeks of silent companionship. She thought about the boy's resilience, his courage in facing a world that often ignored him, and her own growing commitment to his well-being. Their bond was not defined by words but by actions, gestures, and shared understanding. Each morning, each meal, each drawing was a thread weaving a tapestry of trust, connection, and hope. Despite the looming tension, there were moments of serenity. Watching him eat quietly, seeing the small drawings he left behind, observing the tiny signs of trust and comfort, it all reminded Lena why she continued her quiet mission of care. They had created a world within the world, a space of safety, warmth, and understanding that belonged only to them. And in that world, for those fleeting moments each day, fear and danger held no power, and the boy could simply be, and she could simply care. The bond between them had grown beyond simple acts of feeding and protection. It had become a shared rhythm of life, a quiet understanding that transcended words. Lena realized that trust, patience, and kindness could create a profound connection, even in the absence of language. And though the shadows of the outside world still lingered, she knew that their bond was unbreakable, a quiet force that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. One quiet morning, Lena was arranging the food for the boy as usual, her hands moving quickly and efficiently, while the cafe slowly filled with the soft hum of early customers. She had grown used to this rhythm, the small rituals that defined their connection, the careful placement of bread, the small drawing she would leave beside the plate, and the anticipation of his arrival. But that morning was different. A distant but growing roar broke the calm, the unmistakable sound of helicopters approaching. Lena froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She ran to the window and saw a fleet of helicopters descending, landing directly in front of the cafe. Chaos erupted almost immediately. Armed personnel spilled out of the helicopters, moving swiftly to secure the area. Lena's mind raced, her eyes darting to the boy who had just arrived at the steps. His usual calm demeanor vanished, replaced by fear. He instinctively moved closer to the cafe door, seeking the familiar safety Lena had provided for months. She gestured for him to come inside, and he hesitated, unsure of the world outside and even more unsure of what this sudden intrusion meant. The helicopters were large, military-style machines, and the presence of uniformed personnel sent waves of tension through the small street. Lena's customers froze in shock, unsure of what was happening. Some whispered nervously, while others stood rooted to the spot, staring in disbelief. Lena's focus, however, was entirely on the boy. She stepped out slightly, her voice calm but firm, urging him toward safety. The boy complied, trusting her guidance, moving slowly with cautious steps. The situation quickly escalated. Officials and journalists appeared, asking questions in rapid succession. Lena's heart raced as she watched them searching the street, their eyes scanning for someone or something. She realized with dawning horror that this was no ordinary interruption. Something significant, something larger than either she or the boy had encountered before was happening. The boy clung to the plate of food she had just prepared, and Lena knew she needed to keep him safe until she understood the situation. One of the officials approached her, a tall man with a clipboard and a stern expression. He asked if she knew the boy, if she had seen him before, and Lena's instincts screamed at her to protect him. She nodded slightly, careful with her words, and explained that she had only noticed him outside the cafe, feeding him when she could. She kept her voice steady, refusing to give away too much, knowing that any slip could endanger the boy. The official scribbled notes, his eyes never leaving the boy, and then moved on. Lena could feel the tension in the air, the uncertainty of what might happen next. Meanwhile, the boy seemed frozen, caught between fear and recognition. He had seen Lena as a constant presence in his life, a source of safety and care, and now the world around them had shifted violently. Despite the chaos, he remained close to her, as if seeking reassurance in her familiar presence. Lena reached out her hand, gently guiding him to a corner of the cafe where he could remain relatively safe, while the officials searched and the helicopters continued their operations outside. As the minutes stretched into hours, Lena began piecing together the situation. She overheard snippets of conversation, words like missing child, high-profile family, and search operation. Her heart skipped. The boy was not just a child living alone on the streets. There was a reason people were looking for him, a reason the world had suddenly invaded the small, quiet corner of her life. She didn't fully understand the details yet, but one thing was clear. The boy's past, long hidden from view, was now colliding with the present. The boy, as always, was silent, but Lena noticed subtle shifts in his behavior. His hands fidgeted with the edges of his jacket, His eyes darted nervously toward the commotion, and he occasionally glanced at Lena as if seeking permission to stay or flee. She offered a reassuring smile, placing a hand lightly on the table where he sat. He hesitated, then relaxed slightly, understanding that she was still there for him, that their bond remained a small sanctuary amid the chaos. Journalists began snapping photos, and a few customers grew agitated, trying to get past the barricades. Lena stayed calm, refusing to allow the boy's attention to wander, guiding him through the noise with quiet gestures. She realized that the months of trust they had built now mattered more than ever. The boy had survived harshness and neglect, but the intrusion of the world outside threatened to overwhelm him. Her role had shifted from caregiver in quiet moments to protector in a storm. Hours passed and the helicopters remained stationed outside the cafe. Officials eventually approached, carefully explaining that the boy had been missing from a high-profile family, and that they had been searching for him extensively. Lena's heart raced. The boy had been living on the streets, surviving day by day, largely unnoticed by the world. And she had been his only constant, his only source of safety and care. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions, relief that he would be safe, fear for the uncertainty of what this reunion might bring, and pride in the quiet acts of kindness that had made a difference in his life. The boy's eyes flicked to Lena, a subtle but unmistakable sign of recognition. Even in the presence of strangers, officials, and chaos, he sought her out, as if to say that she had been his lifeline. Lena knelt beside him, offering a gentle smile and a touch on the hand. He responded in kind, gripping her hand briefly before letting go. It was a quiet exchange, simple but powerful, conveying a lifetime of trust, gratitude, and connection in a single gesture. As the officials began organizing the process of reuniting the boy with his family, Lena stayed close, quietly observing. The boy was hesitant, uncertain of the world he was about to re-enter, but Lena's presence provided a bridge of stability. She understood that this moment was monumental, not only for the boy's future but also for the culmination of the quiet bond they had nurtured over months. The world had suddenly intervened, but the core of their connection remained intact. Finally, the boy's family arrived. The reunion was emotional, filled with tears, hugs, and frantic questions. Lena watched from a distance, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and bittersweet emotion. She had been his guardian in the shadows, the one constant in his life, and now that the world knew his story, she could no longer remain hidden in the background. The family approached her, their eyes full of gratitude, acknowledging her role in their child's survival. Words were exchanged, simple expressions of thanks, but Lena's mind was overwhelmed by the recognition of what had transpired. She had changed his life through quiet, consistent acts of care, and now, the world would know. The boy clung briefly to Lena, resting his head against her shoulder in a moment of silent acknowledgement. It was a farewell, but also a statement of trust and love. Lena felt tears prick her eyes, but she held back, understanding the importance of letting him move forward. Their bond had been forged in quiet moments, through meals, drawings, and gestures, and though the world was now intruding, it could not erase the impact of their connection. As the helicopters lifted off and the family took the boy away, Lena returned to the cafe, a mixture of emptiness and fulfillment in her heart. The quiet mornings, the small routines, the silent gestures, all of it had mattered. She realized that her life had been profoundly affected by this boy, and that the acts of kindness she had offered without expectation had created a lasting impact. The cafe returned to its usual rhythm, but Lena knew that her world had expanded, that she had been part of something far greater than herself. In the weeks that followed, Lena reflected on the events of that morning. The chaos, the helicopters, the officials, and the reunion, all of it had been overwhelming, but it also confirmed the power of empathy, patience, and dedication. She understood that her small, human gestures had made a difference in a life that the world had overlooked for far too long. And though the boy was no longer present in her daily routine, the lessons, memories, and quiet bond they had shared would remain with her forever. The cafe continued to serve its regular customers, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee filling the air. Yet within Lena there was a sense of quiet transformation. She had witnessed firsthand how compassion, even in its smallest form, could alter the course of a life. She had been the boy's anchor in a world that often ignored him, and in return, he had taught her the value of patience, trust, and the deep unspoken connections that define our humanity. Evenings were calmer now, but Lena would sometimes look toward the steps where he had once sat, imagining him safe, cared for, and surrounded by love. The helicopters, the officials, and the reunion had been dramatic, but the essence of the story, the quiet acts of daily kindness, remained the most powerful element. Lena's heart held a profound understanding that life's true impact often comes not from grand gestures, but from the consistent, patient, and compassionate actions we take for those who need it most. After the boy was reunited with his family, Lena returned to her cafe feeling a mix of relief, pride, and a lingering emptiness. The quiet routine she had built around him no longer existed, and the steps where he had waited each morning felt achingly empty. She continued her work, greeting customers, pouring coffee, and preparing pastries, but her mind often wandered back to him. She remembered the first day she had left food for him, the way he had cautiously accepted it, and the silent connection that had grown over months of small gestures and careful attention. Even though the boy was no longer present, Lena could feel his influence on her life. She found herself noticing the small things around her cafe more deeply. The way sunlight fell on the tables, the sound of laughter from a corner booth, the quiet gestures of appreciation from customers. These moments, which she might have overlooked before, now reminded her of the subtle, profound connections that could exist between people, even without words. She understood that kindness, patience, and empathy could ripple through the lives of others in ways that were invisible, but powerful. Lena began to reflect on the months she had spent caring for the boy. She remembered the early mornings, the preparation of fresh bread and fruit, and the drawings she had left for him. Each act of care, no matter how small, had contributed to a bond that had ultimately helped him survive and thrive. She realized that her own life had been enriched by this connection. She had learned to trust her instincts, to communicate without words, and to value the quiet power of human compassion. As the days passed, Lena received unexpected visitors. The boy's family came to the cafe one morning, expressing their gratitude for her unwavering care. They shared stories about the boy's life before he had disappeared, about the worries and fears they had endured, and about the relief and joy they felt upon being reunited with him. Lena listened quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment and deep satisfaction. She had been a lifeline in their child's life, a constant presence during a time when the world had overlooked him, and now her role was acknowledged and appreciated. The boy himself visited briefly, shy but smiling, holding a small piece of paper in his hand. He handed it to Lena, and she unfolded it to reveal a drawing, a depiction of the cafe with both of them present, surrounded by hearts and sunlight. It was a simple but profound expression of gratitude and recognition. Lena felt tears prick her eyes as she held the drawing close. It was a reminder that their connection had endured, that the impact of her quiet acts of kindness had been deeply felt and would not be forgotten. In the weeks that followed, Lena continued her work at the cafe, but she also began to expand her focus. She noticed other people in need, children and adults who were often overlooked, and she found ways to offer small acts of care, whether it was leaving extra food, offering a warm drink, or simply providing a listening ear. Her experiences with the boy had opened her heart and heightened her awareness of the needs of others. She realized that compassion was a practice, something to be nurtured and shared, and that every gesture, no matter how small, could make a meaningful difference. The cafe itself seemed to transform as well. Customers sensed the warmth and kindness that Lena radiated, and the atmosphere became more welcoming and inclusive. People lingered longer, conversations flowed more freely, and a sense of community blossomed in the space she had quietly nurtured. Lena understood that the lessons she had learned through her bond with the boy extended far beyond their interactions. They shaped the way she engaged with everyone around her, fostering empathy, patience, and a deeper appreciation for the human experience. Lena also reflected on the boy's resilience. Despite the challenges he had faced, he had shown remarkable courage, adaptability, and intelligence. He had survived on his own for months, navigating a world that often ignored or feared him, and he had learned to communicate in ways that were subtle but deeply meaningful. Lena admired his strength and recognized that their relationship had been mutually enriching. She had provided care and guidance, but he had also taught her the value of trust. silent understanding, and the power of human connection. As the seasons changed, Lena found solace in the memories of their time together. She often thought of the quiet mornings, the shared meals, and the small drawings that had conveyed so much. These memories became a source of inspiration, motivating her to continue acting with kindness and empathy in all aspects of her life. She understood that even when people were no longer physically present, the impact of meaningful connections could endure, shaping one's perspective and actions for a lifetime. Lena's relationships with her colleagues and the regular customers also deepened. They noticed the change in her demeanor, the quiet confidence and warmth that she radiated. People began seeking her advice, sharing their own stories, and offering support in return. Lena embraced these interactions, recognizing that the connections she had fostered with the boy had prepared her to engage more fully with the world. She had learned to listen with empathy, to act with patience, and to value the small but significant ways that human beings could care for one another. In quiet moments, Lena would sometimes imagine the boy's life with his family. She pictured him smiling, safe, and surrounded by love, and she felt a profound sense of relief and contentment. She knew that her role in his life had been temporary but crucial, and that the bond they had shared would always remain a cherished memory. The world had recognized her efforts, but even if it had not, the knowledge that she had made a tangible difference in the life of a child who needed her would have been enough. One evening, as Lena closed the cafe, she looked out at the empty steps where the boy had once sat. The street was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. She took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and hope. The cafe had been her world, and the boy had been a central part of it, but now it was also a space of possibility, a place where she could continue to touch lives in small but meaningful ways. She understood that the lessons she had learned, the importance of patience, empathy, and quiet perseverance, would guide her actions for years to come. In the months that followed, Lena continued to offer kindness and support to those around her. She helped children who were struggling, offered encouragement to customers facing difficulties, and provided a listening ear to anyone who needed it. The boy's presence had taught her that even the smallest gestures could have a profound impact, and she embraced this understanding fully. Each day became an opportunity to practice compassion, to extend the same care she had offered to the boy to others in need. Though the boy was no longer physically present, Lena's life had been irrevocably changed. She carried the lessons of their shared experiences in her heart, and she continued to honor the bond they had formed through quiet, consistent acts of care. The cafe remained a place of warmth, connection, and empathy, reflecting the values that Lena had cultivated over months of dedicated attention and love. In time, the story of the boy and the kind waitress began to reach others. People who learned about Lena's actions were inspired to act with similar compassion in their own communities. They realized that small, thoughtful gestures could have a ripple effect, touching lives in ways that were both visible and invisible. Lena's example became a quiet but powerful reminder of the impact that one person could have when motivated by genuine care and empathy. Lena often thought about the boy, imagining his smile, his drawings, and the silent trust that had defined their relationship. She understood that their bond was a testament to the enduring power of kindness, and that it had created a ripple of positive change that extended far beyond their small cafe. The memories of their time together continued to inspire her, shaping her actions, her perspective, and her approach to the world. As the years passed, Lena's cafe flourished, not only as a business but as a community hub, a place where people felt seen, heard, and valued. The lessons she had learned from the boy influenced every aspect of her interactions, reminding her that empathy, patience, and quiet care were the foundations of meaningful human connection. And though the boy had moved on to a life filled with safety and love, the impact of their relationship remained a central part of Lena's journey, a constant reminder that small acts of kindness could change lives forever. In the end, Lena understood that the true value of her actions was not in recognition or reward, but in the lives she touched and the bonds she forged. The boy had taught her the importance of trust, the strength found in quiet connection, and the profound influence that one person's care could have on another. She carried these lessons with her, living each day with intention, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to make the world a little brighter, one small act at a time. Months had passed since the boy had been reunited with his family, and life at the cafe had slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. Lena moved through her days with a sense of calm, but her mind often drifted to him. She wondered how he was adjusting, how his laughter sounded, and whether he still remembered their shared mornings, the small drawings, and the meals that had meant so much to both of them. Even though he was no longer physically present, he had left an indelible mark on her heart, one that shaped the way she saw the world and how she interacted with everyone around her. One cool morning, Lena was arranging pastries when she noticed a small envelope slipped under the cafe door. Curiosity sparked. She picked it up and opened it carefully. Inside was a note, simple and unadorned, with a few words written in the boy's unmistakable handwriting. "Thank you for everything. I am safe because of you." Her chest tightened with emotion. Tears threatened, but she smiled softly, realizing that their bond had endured despite the distance. Even separated, their silent connection had left a lasting impression on both their lives. Inspired by the note, Lena decided to extend the lessons she had learned from her time with the boy to her broader community. She began to create small, deliberate ways to help people in need. She started leaving leftover meals at the door for anyone hungry, discreetly, without asking questions. She noticed a stray cat often lingering near the cafe and made sure it had food and a warm place to sleep. She offered quiet encouragement to regular customers struggling with their own challenges, lending a patient ear or a gentle word whenever needed. Her actions were never grandiose or showy, but they were consistent and heartfelt, touching lives in ways that were small but profound. Lena's colleagues began noticing the subtle shift in her demeanor. She was calmer, more patient, and exuded a warmth that had not been present before. She shared glimpses of the boy's story with them, careful to preserve the dignity and privacy of his life, but using it to inspire small acts of kindness within the cafe. Together, they began to find ways to make the space more welcoming, creating an environment where everyone, children, regulars, and newcomers alike, felt seen, valued, and safe. The cafe became more than a place to eat. It became a small sanctuary, much like the one Lena had provided for the boy. One afternoon, a young girl wandered into the cafe, hesitant and alone. She reminded Lena of the boy in many ways. The way she lingered near the doorway, cautious eyes scanning the room, a palpable sense of vulnerability. Lena's instincts kicked in immediately. She prepared a small plate of food and placed it gently on the counter, leaving it just within the girl's reach. The girl's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and relief, as she slowly approached and began to eat. Lena knelt beside her, offering a soft smile and quiet company. Remembering how important those early gestures of trust and care had been for the boy. The girl's shoulders relaxed slightly, and Lena felt a deep sense of purpose, realizing that the lessons from her experience with the boy could continue to ripple outward, touching lives one person at a time. As the weeks progressed, Lena's cafe became a hub for quiet compassion. People in need came seeking comfort, not always food or drink, but a safe space and a friendly presence. Lena learned to read subtle cues, the way someone avoided eye contact, the slight tremble in a hand, the hesitant steps near the doorway, and respond with patience and understanding. Her approach was never intrusive or judgmental. It was always gentle, consistent, and empathetic. Each small act, whether it was offering a warm drink, lending a book, or simply sitting silently with someone, reinforced the power of presence and human connection. One morning, Lena found a drawing left on a table, much like the ones the boy had left for her. It depicted the cafe with a little figure in the corner holding a cup, a heart drawn above. She recognized the sentiment immediately, the quiet communication of gratitude and recognition, simple but deeply meaningful. The drawing reminded her of the boy and the impact of their shared experiences. She carefully placed it on a bulletin board in the cafe, a silent tribute to the lasting effect of kindness, and a reminder to herself and others that small,